Hi, everyone. It's Sister Elizabeth, and you're listening to In the Company of Charity, the podcast of the Daughters of Charity. And I'm here today, as usual, with my co host, Sister Liz Schoberg. And she's got quite a story to tell us today of just some recent events. But she also has a great interview, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Sister Liz, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm exhausted.
I bet you are.
I'm going to sleep like a baby tonight after the crazy, wonderful, amazing weekend we had.
Well,
We
tell us
had,
more.
tell us, do tell. It's like
Do tell.
like we planned this.
Tell us all about it.
So our dear ministry down here, Proyecto Juan Diego in Brownsville, is celebrating 20 years as an organization serving the community. And we had back-to-back huge events. One of them was a luncheon where we raised about $20,000, and that's pretty cool. And then the next day, we had a huge event for the whole community. We shut down the parking lot. We had music and games. If you're familiar with the community, we called it Proyecto Fest, but it's kind of like how the churches have a kermesse. That's what the word is, kermesse. It's like a carnival or a festival. And we did have dancing horses, and it was amazing. We'll have to
No,
somehow
dancing
post a link.
horses.
They danced, and we had them in one area of the parking lot, which was kind of a little bit further away from where the music DJ was. And I had told the guy, hey, if you want to go and tell the DJ which songs you want him to play, he said that's fine. And he was like, okay. And I thought he was going to get off the horse and like walk over there, but he just went with the horse on the horse past through all the crowd over to where the DJ was. Oh gosh. I was thinking to myself, please don't hurt anyone. Please don't step on anyone. No, but it was so fun, and everybody did an amazing job. We had a great celebration, and Sister Phyllis came back, our good friend Sister Phyllis, to visit, who was at Proyecto for 17 years, founded it and was there for 17 years. So what a great celebration. But as you know, as someone who has done big events, it's logistics and planning and execution. So my little heart palpitations were going, but praise God, we survived it and had an amazing time.
And you raised some great money for your project, but it's not always about the money. I mean, that's important, but it's the friend raising, it's the fellowship that's there, and for 20 years. I mean, 20 years is a long time.
Yes.
That's beautiful. And yeah, Sister Phyllis Peters, crazy, a wonderful, lovely woman, is now in Utica. Shout out to Utica, because
and you're going to see her in like 3 days.
And I'm going to see her in like 3 days. Yeah, I'm so excited. I realized, I'm on this trip, this heritage trip. I was in Paris for 3 weeks. I haven't been home since April 14th, and met up with the seminary sisters in Emmitsburg, beginning of May. And I just realized, and you probably have this experience too, and you probably felt it a little bit with the sisters, I'm sure, who attended your celebration, that I just kind of looked around the room a couple of times and thought, wow, all these sisters had something to do with my life, in community. There was Sister Virginia Ann Brooks was in Emmitsburg, and I thought, oh, she was the visitatrix when I came. And then when there's Sister Maria Nero, who was, it lived with me in St. Agnes, who was just a wonderful sister to live with. And it was just, I could name 20 people who, and I realized, being with the seminary sisters, I said, remember the people who influenced you, because, later on, you're going to look back and realize these women have formed you really well, that they were part of the strength of your vocation, and I think Phyllis is one of those people too. Sister Phyllis is just an amazing person, and I can see, when you were with her in Brownsville at Proyecto, and now, when I was with her in Utica, she's just one of those people you'll never forget.
You can't, because she is just on the go, serving, always thinking, always moving. And, now let's just say she's a octogenarian. So she's going, girl. She is moving.
Yeah.
What a great great soul.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And so I'm heading, as you said, to Utica pretty soon, and so I'll be seeing Sister Phyllis, and we'll let her know that we spoke and that you enjoyed
yes.
having her, of course. And I can't wait to see her. But we can't wait to hear this interview with you and Sister Joyce Weller from the province of St. Elizabeth and Seton, and just talk about another powerhouse, daughter of charity, another witness to the charism, another sister who is just a formator through and through. Joyce is just amazing.
And she is well loved by so many people, anyone who knows her, because she's also hilarious. She's not just like a good daughter of charity, prayerful, like servant of the poor, but she is hysterical. Like, you guys are going to love this interview. Full of her story, full of stories from her childhood and from today, and some really powerful stuff. I mean, stick around towards the end where she talks about some of the things going on in Los Angeles with their ministry. It's just really neat. I do want to be her when I grow up. She's just a cool lady.
She is. She absolutely is, and a great storyteller. So get yourselves ready. Go get a cup of tea or something, or get yourselves ready for a really amazing episode, and just enjoy her, as so many people do who get to spend time in real time with her. It's just great to have this interview with her. So let's get on with it. Sister Joyce Weller is going to be up.
Here she is. Okay, well, welcome everybody. You're listening to In the Company of Charity podcast. This is Sister Liz, and I'm here with Sister Joyce Weller, and this has been a long time coming of having you, Sister Joyce, on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time.
You're very, very welcome. Happy to be here.
Well, it's just so exciting to have you here and to hear a little bit about your story, how you met the daughters, how this thread of charity and how we play this little point in history along the many, many years and decades and hundreds of years that we've been around. So tell us a little bit about you, like where you are right now, and then we can kind of dive into your origin story.
All right. So right now I'm sitting in Los Angeles, California, in a neighborhood that's known as Westlake. It's a mile west of Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles. And it's in a little area that has a concentration of works of the Daughters of Charity. Our hospital closed in 2019. It's a stone's throw away. It is still closed, but there's lots of good activity going on, even after that, when there was a lot of sadness, both in the city of Los Angeles. It was the first hospital in Los Angeles, and it was the first Catholic hospital, and it is the last Catholic hospital in the city of Los Angeles. There are others in the county. So Los Angeles, as you probably know, is a huge, huge population, huge territory of people. However, I grew up in San Francisco, which is a much smaller town, 49 square miles, and lived in the Bay Area until I came to the community. Been to many places. I think if I look back on my desire as a daughter of charity, there was only one place that I really dreaded being on mission. And I actually spoke to God about that several times, that the only place I really would not want to live was Los Angeles. So as we all know, as Daughters of Charity, those are the ways that God gets us to do what we really need to do. So here I am. I'm in my 22nd year here in Los Angeles.
That's awesome. But tell us, Sister Joyce, a little bit about how you grew up and how you came to know the community.
Okay. So as a small child, my mother and father had 5 children. My oldest sister was born in San Francisco, and my second sister was born in Honolulu because my dad was non-military and was called to Honolulu after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So my sister was born there, And a second sister, Kathleen, was born there. And then my parents came back to San Francisco. My second sister died of meningitis when she was about 9 months old. And after that, I was born in Oakland because my mother's mother-in-law lived there and was helping my mother with the children when she had what she thought was going to be a child, one little child, and she got two little girls. Unexpected, she did not know. So then my mother had four girls. 3 years later, 2 years later, my mother was pregnant with her fifth child, and my dad died very suddenly at age 33, 34 of a heart attack. So after that, my mother, it's a long story of, living with relatives, not being able to work. She had small children. And subsequently, we were placed in the care of the Court of California because our mother could not care for us. So the state of California at that time, like now, tries to find family members first, and we're unable to do that. We lived briefly with our grandmother, and then Catholic Social Services of San Francisco placed us at Mount St. Joseph's in San Francisco. Mount St. Joseph's at that time was almost 100 years old and had been transitioning from a typical orphanage. And, if you think about orphanages, you think about long rows of beds with little tables in between and, lots of kids. And it was that way. But it very quickly transformed into a more communal living situation where the rooms were divided and girls lived in rooms of 4 instead of rooms of 50. It became more modern. I started school with the Daughters of Charity at Mount St. Joseph. All of the children went to school up to 8th grade at the Mount. And then each year they moved back a grade until by the time I got to 4th grade, we went out to school. So they were transporting the kids to all different Catholic schools in San Francisco. There was a bus and public transportation. And I went to Sacred Heart, which was the San Rafael Dominicans in San Francisco. When I started high school, my oldest sister and my second oldest sister had gone to ICA, which was a San Jose Dominican high school. So my twin sister and I, all 5 of us went to Immaculate Conception, which was the school that we graduated from. And then when I left the Mount, I lived as a live-in babysitter. I lived with one of the board members whose wife was having her 7th child, and her oldest child was 9. So she had these 7 little kids, and I lived with them and went to college. And it was during that time that I began to discern about a vocation. But I waited until I finished my bachelor's, and then I entered the community in 1968.
What were the sisters like when you were growing up there? I mean, sometimes you hear these stories like, she was so curmudgeonly, or there was mean one did this or that. I think sometimes we get stopped on the street from people who have these memories, good or bad, of sisters.
Yeah. I think, it's like anything else. You think about teachers in school, some experiences are very good and some experiences are very bad. But I will say to you clearly that the formation of the sisters who worked with kids was one of respect and kindness. Now, firmness, yes. You can imagine if you had 45 kids in a group that you had to have boundaries and guidelines. But all of the horror stories you hear about beatings and isolation and, having kids not eat, all those kinds of things just did not exist with the sisters. I would say that St. Louise always did not believe that children should be physically punished. She said that in her writings. And I think that was very, very obvious at the Mount with the sisters there. Some sisters were more firm. Other sisters were more affectionate, but I think there was a total understanding. And, I was there for 11 years. So that was a lot of sisters over that period of time that I had as group mothers. And each one of them was uniquely themselves, which is one of the things that I loved about the Daughters of Charity. There were no cookie cutter Daughters of Charity. There just weren't. And I found with other communities that kind of this uniformity of action and behaviors was impressed upon their formation. Whether you called it a protocol or you called it a rule, whatever it was, the daughters were uniquely themselves. Every one of those sisters was uniquely themselves. And children, just like they do in school, learn to respond according to whatever that person is. Now, we moved up in the groups. When I first went there were 5 groups. Then we divided into 7. So here they go. Pixies, Bluebirds, Brownies, Teens, Junior Miss, Seniors. And those groups were kind of divided by age, but the beginning and end might flex according to the needs of the group or the needs of the child. So we knew that if I had Sister Andrea in Junior Miss, that I was going to have Sister Patricia in Seniors, unless Sister Patricia got mission. So we kind of knew who the next person was coming, and they definitely knew when we were coming.
They got the inside scoop of all of you.
But very much like families, you think about each kid in the family having their own personality. There was no pegboardiness, no thinking that we all had to be or behave or feel in a certain way. And I think that is, well, since I was only in one orphanage, I can't say for sure, but from other experiences of talking to people who lived in congregate care, that is a very unique characteristic of the daughters. Sister Sylvia, who was one of my sister servants, told me that when she felt like she had the daughters in high school, but she also had an aunt who was a Dominican and had Dominicans in grade school. And when she discerned that she wanted to become a daughter, her aunt was very upset. And her aunt said to her, "Why can't you become a Dominican? You know us, I'm your auntie." And she said, and Sylvia told me this, she was kind of shocked herself when she said it. She said, "The daughters are real people. The daughters are real people." I think that's true today. I think that's true today. I look at the sisters I live with, and each one of them brings their individuality, their gifts, their barnacles, all of the things that make us who we are, our uniqueness. But we are respected in that uniqueness. Not only respected, celebrated. That we're not all the same.
We were talking before we hit record about the different things that you learned while you were there.
Yeah.
Maybe just to share with the listeners, what were some of those unique things or those life skills, those events that you guys went to? What were those experiences for you?
So, first of all, we did common work as children. We also got allowances. We also had ballet and music lessons and Friday night movies. We also went out frequently with volunteers to circuses and plays and Nutcracker suites. We went out with the sailors when the sailors came in, out to Treasure Island. We had the labor unions gave us Christmas parties. There was a plethora of activities for all of us. We also had homework every night. We had homework hour. We also prayed the rosary every night. We had choir. We had counseling. When we got to be 15, you could smoke. We had a smoking room.
Oh my gosh.
No, isn't it incredible? And Lisa's like, "What?" I go, "Lisa, it was the day." And they didn't want the girls out secretly smoking or starting fires. So they set the smoking room up. Now, you weren't required to smoke, and many of us did smoke, but that was, So there was this kind of recognition of the natural stages of growth and development. Once you were in school, you could participate in your school activities also, but we had boundaries about time at home. We had boundaries about our homework. Some of us could go away for weekends, it depending on what your court situation was, if you could be with your family or not be with your family. We got to know each other's families. We had many new kids that came in and out. A lot of good human relationship skills we learned simply by living with such a diverse population of all girls, of course, and sisters. I remember I told this story. I must have been about maybe 8 or 9 years old, and we had these long corridors, of course, and we had hardwood floors. So twice a year, the hardwood floors had to be waxed. So when we got older, you could learn how to use the buffer. You could work in the kitchen. You could volunteer at the front desk to answer the phone. There were a series of jobs that you could apply for, and my salary when I worked in the kitchen was $11 a month. Our allowance was $12 a month. And out of that had to come your clothing, your cigarettes, and any kind of fun stuff you want to do. So it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a reasonable amount for people our age. And then when you got a job, you had to save a certain amount. We got set up with banking accounts. We learned how to do that. We learned how to balance checkbooks. We learned how to work in the laundry. I can make a cornet to this day. We learned how to separate whites from darks. Liz, do you do that?
I do that. Yes,
All
I
right,
do.
well,
I promise.
I am proud of you. Whoever trained you did a good job, because some of us don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true, just the life skills that you're talking about. I mean, it really depends on your family situation, what you come up with and what do you come to the community with.
Yeah. And how to deal with conflict, because you can imagine, there were a lot of girls that came from just horrible situations. And sometimes you knew their stories and sometimes you didn't know their stories. Some were there for months, some were there for years. Now, there's a group of us that were there for a long time together, and we still hang out after all this time. And we still sing the songs and we still tell the stories. And just like any family, you kind of build these relationships together. But the sisters were very focused on making sure that we were ready, because in California at that time, you were emancipated when you graduated.
High school.
So from high school. So the thing was, I was 17 when I graduated from high school. The emancipation process started in September of my senior year. I was 16. So I was emancipated when I was 16. But I didn't start my emancipation till I left at 17. And everybody who left had to have a plan. There was no other plan. There was no plan from the courts. There was no plan for schooling. There was no,
there was no ongoing support or follow-up or anything.
Now there is, there's lots of programs in place, especially for kids who come out of foster care, so that kids have this period of time, like until they're 21 or so, with some kind of a support system. But we all knew that. And the sister's job was to get us ready. And we used to say that about Sister Patricia. She was the senior. It was no nonsense time. She just made sure that we were ready. She was on us all the time. Where are you going? Have you looked at apartments? Are you packed? What is the plan? So we were so well prepared to, take the next step.
When you looking back, I mean, now that you've been a part of the community for as long as you have, do you see God's hand in the fact that here you're with the daughters, where our foundress is the patron of social workers,
Right.
essentially set up foster care system in Paris. So What's your thought on that of how God was moving in you?
But it's an interesting thing because there was some resistance from a couple of the sisters about my coming to the community. And when I tried to trace the resistance, I think over time I began to understand that they wanted to make sure that I wasn't coming because I was afraid to live in the real world. From their perspective, it was like, well, you didn't have a normal growing up, so you're looking for a not normal way of life, in the sense that it was different, and you didn't have the same kind of responsibilities. And so I really did think about that. And I actually worked with somebody before I came to the community on my own, because I wanted to be sure too that a vocation was not just a way out to something that I thought would be fun. And I think many of us, when we were young, we weren't I wasn't serious enough to know the full calling of a vocation. But who does at 18 and 19 and 20? We think we do, but we know that that calling is enlarged and expansive. It grows with us as we move through the community. And that's how we know we belong. Because if the calling takes us backwards, if the calling oppresses us, if the calling makes us less of who we want to be, that's God's way of letting us know this isn't the place. So, the one thing that I really trusted, because all of my life, I remember saying to God, if this isn't what you want from me, you're going to let me know. Even when I was 8 and 9 years old, I would say that, God, if this isn't what I'm supposed to do, you let me know. And when I didn't get the message, I knew I was free to do what I needed to do.
He's got to speak up, because you're just going to keep moving.
But I think that came from the daughters. I think, and I probably don't remember this, being 6 and 7 years old and hearing, I love the Miraculous Medal stories. I memorized them all. I loved the stories. Do you know the little girl that said no? Do you ever hear that one? Oh my gosh, the little girl. Anyway, it's too long to tell you this, but I'll tell you. No, the little girl who said I won't. It was about a little rich girl. That story impressed me so much because she had everything she needed. She had a wealthy family. She had every desire. She had a nurse. She had a teacher. And yet she was a miserable person. And in the story, it was all about her not following what God was telling her, or what a good person was supposed to do, how we were to grow close to others, how we were to take care of others. She couldn't do that. She just thought people were, useless. And I think that story had a lasting impression on me because, like that child, I thought to myself, God's going to show me the way, and I'm going to know if this is not for me. And I think we do know when it's not for us. Sometimes it's in little ways, sometimes it's in big ways. But that thread of trusting God's path, or counting on God to be there for us, was absolutely embedded in my memory from the time I was 5 years old. And that was the daughters, and it was my own mother. I mean, my mother was a Irish woman, had great faith, had a very hard life. But when she died, I remember one of the things she had in her purse was a rosary and the Serenity Prayer. So I think out of those two worlds of my natural family and the world of the daughters, this vocation was formed. This path was formed for me. And the tools that I learned, I'm still using. So we can't ever dismiss that and think that our work isn't important.
What was that like for you, now that sort of you've gone from being the one helped, so to speak, to on the helping side of things? Maybe you feel like you're both sometimes, aren't we all, right?
Exactly. I think that one of the most challenging times for me was when I first came to the community, and I realized there were 8 of us in the group that I entered with. And I had this aha moment because I remember one of the sisters said to me, don't tell people that you were raised at Mount St. Joseph's. And I said, why would I not tell them that? And she said, because they are going to think you're damaged. And I said, oh, and I really had not thought about that. I had not thought that somebody might judge me because I was raised differently than they were. But I was cautious about that. And what I learned in those first 2-3 years in formation was that every single person that entered with me had struggled. And some of them had struggled mightily, and some of them had suffered mightily with their parents, with their siblings, with their home situations, but nobody knew it because all they were normal. They were judged to be normal. And I thought to myself, everybody has a story. And we look at somebody's story and think they're different than us, but actually, we are so much more alike in our stories than different. It's like reading a good book. You know, every book has its own little thread and its own, but every story is a good story. Every story has its own little mystery, its own little drama, its own little. And so I stopped thinking about myself as different and started thinking myself as being connected to this bigger story of humanness, of synchronicity, of, how do we fit together, and, what do we learn from each other? What can I learn from you about growing up in a family? And like, I have no brothers. There were no men in my life. My dad died when I was 2.5. So I never knew my dad. I had no brothers. So there was that whole piece of it. And then I grew up with all girls in an orphanage. And when we listen to each other's story, we're always amazed. So not to assume that a story is odd or not odd is the best way to listen, because all stories are amazing. Nobody has a boring life. I have not met a person yet who has had a boring life. Have you?
No, not if you
No?
listen really carefully and you're
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. So
Which
I thank God. I really do. I thank God. I love the stories.
what was it about? Was it St. Vincent, St. Louise? I know you said Catherine Library and the Miraculous Medal was an inspiration to you. Was there any ones that you really like? I just love St. Vincent because of this, or that really inspired you to become a daughter?
Well, the daughters at Mount St. Joseph's, we had regular formation about St. Vincent, about St. Louis. We had movies, we had stories. Like I said, the Miraculous Medal stories were so key to me. There was the green book, the blue book, the yellow book. I read all of those stories. So they had a great impact on me. We were children of Mary. We were enrolled in the Miraculous Medal. We all wore a Miraculous Medal. So there was a lot of the community kind of richness that was just threaded through us as and because I was there so long, we just, we had May crownings, and we had, all of the things that, that the community really loved. And I had a great imagination. I loved that kind of, May crownings and First Communion. Judy and I were angels for First Communion. They only knew. We were the little kids that walked up and the line followed us. And there were so many of those kind of rich traditions that inspire kids. So for me, there was never a question that there would ever be another community. I knew that I felt called to the daughters, but I also knew this. And I said this at the time. I happened to be in it, was dating a young man, and I remember saying to him, look, this may not work out. This may not work out. I don't know if I belong there, but I know this. If I don't do it, I will spend my life regretting the fact that I did not take this step. If it doesn't work out, then I know God has another plan for me, but I have to do this. So, and I really believe that, my vocation, I believed I was called, but from the sisters themselves, I knew that it was discernment. It wasn't a shoe-in. Like I did come and say, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be here forever, even though I desired it. So now I'm 52 years vocation. I think I'm pretty set.
So
Yeah.
what would you say have been like some of the best experiences you've had since coming to the community? Some of those powerful moments for you?
Well, I think for one thing, most of us growing up, believe that we are either attracted to or want to do something significant with our lives. And we usually have a plan for that. I think what the community did for me was it absolutely expanded my boundaries in terms of what I could or could not do. When I was asked to do something that I thought, I don't feel prepared to do that, there was this mutual support, encouragement, and sometimes scolding that said, no, we're not asking you. We need you to do this. And this kind of resistance that I would feel, I had to work through it all the time. And I always ended up on the other side of things. And I think, we believe that we can't do stuff. And all of us have been asked to do so. I'm sure you've been asked to do stuff you thought, I don't think so, and then did it and did it well. So there is this common linkage between us that tells us that we do have to trust one another, and we do have to listen and discern, and to have these kind of honest conversations that say, yeah, I will try that. And sometimes it is okay to say no. Now, when Sister Teresa she asked me if I was principal and sister servant in Phoenix. She asked me if I would do vocation work. And it was not something that I loved vocation work, but it wasn't something that I saw myself doing. I felt I wasn't serious enough to do vocation work, and I'd be off having Cokes and popcorn and going to movies and stuff with the girls, So I thought, I don't know, I'm not really that serious. So Sister Teresa, she kind of bribed me, but she said, let's come and let's try it. And if it did, after a year, if it doesn't work out, then we'll try something else. And I said, okay. She was very good about it. So I came in January. It was in the middle of the school year. Can you imagine? I was principal. You know how popular that made me. But I came in January, and then in March, I got named to the provincial council. And it was like, is this a setup? I was like, how the heck could that happen? Truly, I was so shocked. And I told her that. I said, this isn't right. And she said to me, how do you get to say what's right? I said, well, I didn't know that was going to happen. She goes, well, who the heck knows it's going to happen? She was just like brutal with me, So I got on the council, and I was 3 years on the council, and then became the visitatrix. And that was another moment. Like I said to her, wait, now where do I send my answer? She goes, you don't send your answer. I said, you just told me I had to write a letter. She goes, you send your letter acknowledging receipt that you're the visitatrix. I said, there's no discernment. She goes, the discernment's already happened.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. It's like throw up time, and again, there was a lot of things like, in fact, there was a laywoman there. She was talking to me one day, and she said, no, the consultation's going on. I said, yeah. She goes, you got a knot in your stomach? I said, nah, well, I've been through it before. And she goes, well, we know for sure it's not going to be you. I said, that's why I don't have a knot in my stomach.
And then
it was me. It was like, oh, sorry. So anyway, it's just
God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?
Yeah. But you know what I love about this is that we move into where we belong, and then we move out to where we belong. And you think about the world in terms of leadership. Once you're a leader, you're defined as that, and anything else is a demotion. Anything else is, if you're a sister servant and you're not a sister servant, the world would say, oh my God, what happened? And we move in and out of those roles because the vocation is bigger than any role. We never move out of the vocation. And I love that. I think it's such a positive and healthy movement in the world. That's the way God moves. There's this equality of who we are to God that never shifts, no matter what we do. No matter what we do.
I just think it's really funny that you made this comment about vocation work because I'm sure you're aware of this, that many of the young sisters just love you. I mean, you are quite well known for being a light and a joy and a support
Thank
to
you.
the newer sisters. And so
I don't know if I'm a good model though.
listen,
Sometimes
I don't
say
hear
bad
that part.
They put a swear jar in my office, it's like, all right.
What's your hope like when you look at the community and how it's evolving? Like, what are you seeing as far as signs of the future and what's in store for us?
Well, it's funny because people, we always talk about numbers. And I said, Juana Elizondo, when I went to, I forget which assembly it was, did this history of the community. I never forgot it because did you know Sister Juana?
She know her name. I never.
Oh my God, she was a firecracker. So much fun. But anyway, she did this timeline, and so she was doing this thing. There were this many sisters, and then they went off to Poland, and then there were this many sisters, and then this and this and this. So you see this timeline of this growing number of women who are coming and the growth, and then you get to the French Revolution, and it goes
Whammo.
Zero. And then you see one or two, and she said, this is God's timeline. We don't get to decide the zeros, the ones, the twos, the 20s, the 30s. We do what we need to do each day faithfully, and there will be enough. Stop worrying. Stop worrying. And I look right now in Los Angeles. There were probably 60 sisters in Los Angeles at one time. There are about 14 of us now. And we're doing more work now with the 14 than they did with the 60. And I say to myself, we're yeast. We're yeast. Sister Marjorie always uses this analogy. She said, don't be salt. Salt flavors food. Yeast changes food. We can't be salt. No, salt is numbers. It's like, you can see it, you can taste it, but yeast changes. And I see what's happening here as a prologue to this kind of insertion and walking with the most forgotten people. We've used that term so often about working with the poorest of the poor and all of that. We are sitting in that time right here. We are sitting with the most lost, the most forgotten. I don't know if Lisa told you this, but we came out, this was about a month ago, and we were walking to the garage, and the ladies from Meals on Wheels had just come out of their work, and they said, can you help us? Can you help us? And I started running. I'm the oldest. I ran. And Lisa was behind me, and there was a man on the ground. And the lady said to me, he's not breathing. And so I got down, and I was going, sir. And as soon as I saw his face, I said to Lisa, he's gone. His eyes were wide open. There was no breath. There was no movement. He was gray as the pavement. And she said to me, do you have your Narcan? I said, I do. I had it in my purse. So I took it out. I handed it to her. She applied it. 11 seconds. And he came back.
Oh my gosh.
So the fire department was on their way. When they got there, I gave him two milligrams of Narcan. and they said, we're going to give him some more. And they took him to the hospital, and he's back at Casa. Now, he doesn't know that it was Lisa and I. He doesn't have any memory of that day. But when Lisa got in the car, she said, I feel like I'm going to cry. And I said, go ahead and cry. And she goes, but I feel so happy. You know, it was this very emotional kind of experience of saying, wow, we are in the middle of this horrible epidemic of, you know, of
Drug use,
drugs,
opioids.
loss, and homelessness, and, you know, just compacted problems, and weapons and guns, and there's just so much. And yet, what would Vincent de Paul say about us? This is where you belong. And I think you're having more of those experiences too, as I look at the works of your province, and, you know, your kind of movement towards the works that you're doing in New Orleans, and this kind of radical feeling of really being with the people that are on the margins, and being able to do that. I said to Karen Bass is the new mayor of Los Angeles, and I know Karen from other relationships with our, you know, we have this end childhood poverty work that's going on through Grace, and Karen Bass has been very helpful. Now she's the mayor. But I said to her, I said, Karen, the people that can help you the most are never going to be your politicians. Come to your not-for-profits. Come to the people that are here in this village and villages around us. Bring those people together, and we can do something really, really good. But I think we have a path, Liz, that other people don't. But we got it through the charism. And it's a path of connection. It's a path of relationship.
Amen to that. So thank you so much for spending your time with us, and for the witness that you are. And we'll be in touch again soon, I'm sure.